Would you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, I gave away the gist of things a little bit with the children there. We're going to talk about billboards today. Let's talk about billboards. Now, I guess I'm kind of a fan of billboards, but they come up, they crop up all over the place, and they pass on all sorts of messages. So the very basic ones are advertising some product, some service, or a store. And then others might be conveying some political message or something like that. But the best ones, the ones that really stick with you, are the clever ones or the provocative ones, right? Those, they catch your attention and they stick with you and you can remember them. So that's why I like Buc-ee's is they have good puns. They stick with you. But if you were to drive through somewhere like Arkansas, for example, you'd probably see a series of billboards that would say something like, "Repent or you're going to burn in hell." Something along those lines. But if you drive around the greater Houston area, maybe you see something like, you might have seen a preacher enticing you to come listen to him with some catchy phrase in his nice, big, full head of curly hair and his shiny teeth. Not naming names. And then there's this billboard. There's this billboard that Stephanie came across the other day on Highway 90. And the billboard simply says, "Stop having kids." Stops all in caps, big letters. There's a baby in the O with a line through it. Now that's provocative, to say the least. And so, of course, that catches your attention. It sticks with you. So Stephanie went and looked this up. It turns out there is a whole organization called Stop Having Kids, and then the website .org, right? So she goes and finds this website. And so notice, one, there are people who have formed an organization that are so dedicated to this message that, one, they'd formed the organization itself, but then they would put up money to put up this billboard to catch your attention, to convey this message, and to draw you to their website. And there on the website, they have their message spelled out more fully. And so I wanted to read this for you. I quote, stophavingkids.org says, "We want a future where creating biological children is no longer an expectation, a norm, or something most people casually do without putting substantial thought and investigation into. We want a future where those who have the desire and means to care for others than themselves decide to prioritize taking care of and supporting deprived humans and other animals who already exist. We want a future where those who choose to live a child-free lifestyle are able to do so and are not stigmatized, attacked, or questioned for their morally neutral choice to not create new humans." End quote. Now, you don't have to be a Christian to read this and recognize that this message is a bit of a mess. And don't worry, we're not going to spend the whole sermon analyzing this message, as fun as that might be, for some of us at least. But I took the time to read that because I wanted you to hear what the aims of this organization are, and especially that you would hear the end of the message. The end is what I want to focus on. Did you catch it? Did you catch what they said? This organization is essentially saying, hey, don't judge me, man. My choice is morally neutral. Their conscience won't let them claim their decision as a good one, but no one wants to admit to having a bad or a wrong choice, or at least a simply selfish choice. And so this attempt to say, hey, I'm just morally neutral, Let me be me. This is what we call in the church self-justification. It's an attempt to tell the world, and usually yourself, that I'm good, I'm okay, everything, I'm in the clear, or even I'm right. Now, this is human nature. We all do this at some point to some extent, and maybe you've expressed it in terms like, it's my right, or it's not hurting anybody, or at least I'm not doing what those people are doing. Self-justification. It's the natural inclination of all people ever since the fall. It's an expression of this need to be right with God. But the problem is, you cannot justify yourself. In the few verses right before our very short epistle reading this morning, in the 3rd chapter of Galatians, St. Paul writes, "For all who rely on works of the law are under a curse." Works of the law, where we try to justify ourselves. "For it is written, cursed be everyone who does not abide by all things written in the book of the law and do them." Now it is evident, it's clear to everyone that no one is justified before God by the law. For the righteous shall live by faith. But the law is not of faith. Rather, the one who does them shall live by them. Now, I can't speak for the people behind this organization, StopHavingKids.org. I can't tell you whether they live their lives in accord with their message or not. But knowing human nature, my guess is they probably don't live entirely consistent with their message. If you were to look back through that statement, you'll notice there are a lot of qualifications built in, a lot of outs built into it, where you don't really have to do everything that they expect from this. But regardless, whether it's them or you or me, none of us lives fully in accord with the demands of God's law. And so whoever it is, when we try to make ourselves right with God by our own efforts, by our own actions, by our own deeds, you're under a curse. You're cursed. But the good news, friends, is that Jesus took that curse on himself for you. He even became the curse for you. He took it all into himself so that it couldn't just jump over and get to you. Paul writes to the church in Corinth, this is in 2 Corinthians, he wrote that for our sake, God made Jesus to be sin, even though he knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Jesus takes all of your sin, all of it, all of your wrongdoing, all of your misdeeds, all of your confusion, all of your anxiety, everything, all of that into himself. And for that, he's cursed by God. You see, it's not the hanging on the tree that brings the curse, but it's that sin, that crime that is punishable by death. That's what earns someone a seat on the tree. That's the thing that brings God's curse on them. Our reading from Deuteronomy this morning helps address this. It helps flesh this out. It deals with the common situation where the body of a dead criminal would be hung up for everyone to see. It'd be put on a tree or a post, a wooden post. Usually it'd be tied or very likely impaled. And this would send a very clear message to everyone that saw it. Don't do what that guy did. It was sort of like the ancient version of a billboard. Hey, everybody, if you try to imitate old Joe there, you're going to be right where he is. And it's not insignificant that this rule, these regulations for dealing with a body up on a tree, someone who's cursed, and if you leave it up, it'll curse the land. This rule it comes right after, in the text in Deuteronomy, it comes right after rules for dealing with a rebellious son. It's not insignificant. So Deuteronomy 21, the few verses right before what we read this morning, 18 through 21 says, "If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, will not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of the place where he lives. And they shall say to the elders of his city, 'This our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard.' Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall purge the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear." Fellow sons, let's just be honest. Let's be glad that law doesn't apply to us. We might not be here today. But you and me, being the rebellious sons and daughters of God that we are the ones who should be cursed and killed and hung up like a billboard for everyone to see. But instead, Jesus, who is the perfectly obedient Son of God, took that curse on himself for you. And he was hung up on the tree to display and to convey a very different message. The message that God justifies sinners because they can't justify themselves. In other words, God makes you right with him. He restores your relationship to him because you never could do it on your own. Hanging there, suffering for your disobedience, enduring the pain of being killed slowly, of suffocating, enduring the curse of God's wrath, Jesus hung there and cried out a message of blessing. "Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing." God hung Jesus up on a tree, on the cross, as his billboard to send a very clear message to you, to me, to the whole world. First, it reminds us to repent, to turn away from our sin, to turn away from our efforts to justify ourselves, to try to make ourselves right with him. And second, it calls us to look to Jesus in faith, to believe that God has justified you in Christ, that he has made you right with him already because of what Jesus has done, and to trust that Jesus paid your debt because you never could pay it on your own, and that he gives you blessing instead of the curse that you deserved. Christ hangs crucified on a tree for you so that you would turn and look to him in faith and receive forgiveness, healing, life, salvation, and blessing. So may all of us, may we all stop trying to justify ourselves and follow Jesus instead. May we all look to him in faith, receiving his blessings, and follow his lead in this life. And if you remember, little challenge for you this week. As you're driving around, when you see a billboard, remember God's billboard for you. Christ on the cross telling you to repent and that he loves you. And if you can, compare that message to what you see on that billboard. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.